So, hello everybody. I am Florian from the University of Alberta in Edmonton, just saying hi and turning off the camera to leave the space for the presentation. I will speak today about the matrix of documentary VR, a model for the integrated consideration of artistic choices, technical possibilities, viewer engagement, and curatorial practice. I will give you an overview of what I want to do today, starting with two examples and some questions. I want to go and take a look at theory about how we can make meaning of having some kind of a systematization for VR documentary. And I will pull some information out of the theory into my own systematization. And finally, I will show you the matrix of VR documentary, and I want you to ask for some feedback. So starting with the examples, I've been working on VR documentary now for some time, for 3, 4, 5 years almost, and we can see that there are a lot of different kinds of projects, and even if these projects are called VR documentary, there can be very different kinds of approaches of how to deal with elements from the real world, stories, events, people, and so on. So I show you two possible examples. The first, Jerusalem Stories by Dani Levy, is made by the Jewish Museum in Berlin for an exhibition. It is telling four stories from contemporary Jerusalem. And one story phase is about a street corner speaker telling people about the Israeli-Palestine conflict from a personal level. His wife is coming from Palestine and he's from Israel, and he's then pulling the participant out of the group and integrating him or her into the talk. We will see how this is looking in a second. Just mentioning the other project quickly, Manic VR is a French project by Kalina Bertin. It is about a completely computer-generated room that is a study or living room. And I can just look around and explore that space. And from the off, I have stories about experiences with manic depression, the bipolar disorder, that are taken from various sources the director has compiled and recorded prior to the project. And the project changes that room. I can leave that room at a certain point, but I also come back according to the descriptions. So just briefly looking at the phase episode first.
See, they see there's nothing there, but let's build a big wall around nothing. You see? Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know, you're clapping, but this guy, I don't think he likes me. What, man? You don't like me? You don't like what I'm saying? Come on, say something. He's silent. When my wife is silent, I know I'm in trouble. Come on. Come on, come to me. Come. Come, my friend. Come. Don't be... Come on, come. Don't be shy. Give him clap. How are you, my friend? Where are you from? Nothing. What, no English? Come on, talk to me. Where are you from? Where are you? Where your passport? Where? I can't believe I could choose any one of you amazing people, but I choose the only one who is mute. or dumb, I don't know. Or German. Oh my God, he's German! You German! Corrector! He's a German, yeah. No hard feeling, my friend. No hard feeling.
So now quickly looking at the trailer of Manic VR.
Hi, Queena. It's me. I think it started again.
Queena, what do I do with this? The madness and love, the crazy love. This is what this is.
I had a magical belief that Just like Jesus, I had supernatural powers. God had a plan for me.
Everything that has ever been is within us. Each soul can be free.
Okay, that might suffice as a first impression. So we can see that these projects are actually quite different from the making, but also from the topics. So there are some questions regularly asked about a documentary we have. The first is really, is it still some kind of a film, like a documentary film, or is virtual reality leaving the realm of filmic representation? Another question, or two other questions that are linked, is we have on the one hand VR film, usually made with a 360-degree camera, and we have VR experiences on the other, made with computer generated images. So these are totally different techniques, but can both be labeled as documentaries as VR documentaries. And yeah, the question is a VR documentary a first-person game in a real-life context, or is it a documentary film in a VR context? And also the questions of storytelling, as we can see in the two examples, on the one hand, and interactivity are regularly asked. To find some answers for that, I've been looking into theory, and I can state it was a little bit difficult. First of all, the first problem, probably the one that is the most biting one, discussing about these examples, is having computer generated images and real life images. We can see that most of the people who are coming from a games background, from the games industry, that they are rarely speaking about 360-degree images made with a VR camera at all. They're really speaking only about model-based examples that are made and generated into the computer. So one example, this book by Gutierrez et al. Is speaking, having an introduction at the beginning, and then is speaking about computer graphics and computer animation, and then about virtual worlds and the features of the virtual world, starting with virtual characters, and it goes on a little. So there is no mentioning of 360-degree images. A little bit different then is the other group, so to say, that are dealing with cinematic VR. We have John Bucher, for example. He's speaking of Cine VR, or Cass Dooley is speaking about cinematic virtual reality, or finally Céline Tricard. She has written a very important book about VR filmmaking, also made for producers of these forms. Looking at Tricard's book, we see that she's actually discussing live action VR capture on the one hand and game engines and interactive VR on the other. But her main argument, the main part of her book, is then really focusing only on live action VR and storytelling. The same goes if we look into the books a little bit closer at the relationship between immersion, interactivity, and storytelling. The immersion into this project are usually discussed by the people coming from the cinematic film background in relationship to storytelling. John Bucher, for example, is saying the development of immersive storytelling benefits from previous art forms such as the cinema. So he's starting with the cinema, then discussing immersive storytelling, and finally saying no other medium has the potential to provide the viewer with such a fully immersive narrative-led experience as VR. So he's seeing narrative VR as some kind of extension of classical cinema immersive storytelling. Totally different from that, Mary-Laure Ryan on the right, she's comparing the effects of immersion on the one hand and interactivity on the other. And finally, she's saying, if all technological problems are solved, this casting of the body as interface to the computer simulated world should lead to a mutual reinforcement of the two experiences of immersion and interactivity. So she's seeing these two modalities of being there on the spot, on the place, and seeing a virtual world made in the computer, and then also interacting with that world as two coins of the same model. So we can say we have, on the one hand, the computer generated projects, and the people coming from the games background here on the left, dealing with CGI projects, and then we have in the last 5 years people dealing with virtual reality cinema, cinematic virtual reality, VR filmmaking, that are only dealing with films made with 360-degree cameras. There's indeed only one approach I've found that is trying to bridge these two approaches or systems. Written by Mel Slater together with Sanchez Vives. He's one of the guys involved in the experiments with virtual reality now since 15, 20 years. And in the overview article, he is saying that there is some discussion about whether 360-degree videos has been used in some of the pieces described is really VR. He's bringing a example of Will Smith, the actor, speaking in Wired, that these films, 360-degree films, seen in Google Cardboard, for example, should not be called VR. The main argument being that the relationship between head moves and image changes is more related to simulator sickness. But then he's saying mainstream media are already referring to both 360-degree and model-based VR as VR. So this is not going to change. Then he's going to look at different kinds of examples, and his solution, his conclusion at the end is ultimately this means that they are useful for different purposes. If the VR is meant to depict something up close and personal, such as interaction with a virtual character where the participant and virtual character might be arbitrarily changing their position in the space, then this cannot be accomplished by 360-degree, since this type of parallax effect, just moving the head to see the behind the character, is not possible. Therefore, we would conclude that model or graphic-based VR and 360-degree VR are different possibilities in the domain that is referred to as virtual reality, and designers and application builders will use the type of system that fits best with their goals. And as we have seen in the two examples, that if I'm flipping through the photos in Manic VR, we are already having that close interaction, not with characters, but with things, with virtual things. So it's logical that they might use computer-generated backgrounds in that example. Now, I try to find my own systematization, really going back also to documentary VR, because these theoretical approaches are more about VR in general. And I found three things very important. First of all, the world building or real world address, then the role of the participant's body involved through storytelling or interaction, and finally also the question of the dispositif. So what kind of a experience or tool is virtual reality at all? Starting with the first, so the most important thing is really, if you enter a virtual space and set up a head-mounted display, you want to explore that space and look around. And it is really no matter if that is computer-generated or real life, because both is possible. In both ways. You have to see around and make yourself up. What can you do in that space? What can you do in that living room in Manic VR? And the same is also about Jerusalem Stories Face, where you are just there on the street. You see there two shops in the background, and there's the street speaker, and a lot of different kind of people are standing around him, and you need this kind of orientation, and this is linking you to the real outside world. So you know immediately from what the guy is speaking and also how the people look, that you are probably in the Near East, and from what's the guy talking about, it can be Jerusalem. So you are linked to the outside world and to the space he's describing. And the same goes for the other project, Manic VR, where you can see that this is about a more personal experience, as if you are in a private space for yourself and hear the voices telling you about manic depression. Then the second step is giving the participant's body a role, either through storytelling or interaction. That is what Mel Slater has proved in most of his experiments, that virtual reality works well if you have some kind of a role that's directly related to your body. You see here that ice hockey simulation on the left, where the woman is actually standing in an office or something like that, interacting with a sports VR simulation, and what she sees is that she's keeping the goal in an ice hockey game. So, and if that is not plausible for her, or she doesn't want to play ice hockey, that wouldn't work. So there must be some kind of involvement given that gives her some kind of a thing to do that she has to solve in that experience. And what I have seen in looking at a lot of different forms that we have, on the one hand, either interaction, gameplay elements, so looking through photos, putting on the turntable in Manic VR, or the storytelling. So the guy is telling me a story and directly addressing me and involving me into the story, and then I can become part of the story or part of the game. And this is really opening the door also to a deeper established empathy. And the final thing then, briefly speaking about this, so we see that some of the, I would say most of the documentary VRs are really about experience worlds that we probably never experience in real life. So going there and seeing something that is hard to see in real life, or we experience something about the affection of our bodies in a special kind of surrounding. So usually, if we don't have any connections to an illness like manic depression, we see how these people feel and also how their reality is affected by the illness. So we have these two strands interacting with each other. And finally, the question of the dispositif. The big question, are the VR documentaries simply linear films that are immersive and perceived with an HMD, or are the games with a real-life topic? And I would say that VR is not a hybrid form of existing technology only coming from film or only coming from computer games, but it is a new, different, mediated, telepresent perception tool where I can see places, spaces, topics, also people that I can grasp and invent and interact with. Now, this is the theory. Looking at or coming back to the examples, I have made a small study, and for that study, I used the things that I found out, that we have different kinds of dualisms. So first of all, we have cinematic VR or 360-degree film, so it's a technical thing, versus then VR experience or computer-generated images. Then we have the outward aspect of a new world that we explore, and the aspect of body exploration, feelings, thoughts, which is a user-based aspect. And finally, also we have the possibility of interactive exploration, where I can actually do something, and storytelling, so where a short story is told in the VR documentary. Then I have asked 30 students of a seminar about rating these dimensions according to 6 projects they tried out. For every dimension, they could give 12 points, so they could split them, 4 for exploration, 8 for storytelling, but they could also give that to one side only. What we can see is, this is how that looks. So storytelling versus exploration, inner feelings versus outer worlds, and CGI experience versus cinematic VR. And looking at these projects that we had at the beginning, we see that actually faith is really on the storytelling side, because there's a story told by the guy on the street. It is completely made with a real-life images of a 360-degree camera. It is about exploring mostly Jerusalem as a place, and Manic VR is totally in the other directions. It's about inner feelings, psychic states, about made with a computer and exploring that space. And if you look, put these two on top of each other, we see that these are different corners of the whole domain, to quote Slater, that we call VR documentary. And if we look at other examples, so in total, the students were looking at 6 examples, you see that there are some dominant sides of that spectrum, the one more on the cinematic side and the one more on the CGI side. So coming to my conclusion, we can say that there is a relationship between cinematic VR and storytelling. I depict and experience real places that are narratively developed as a slice of life. And on the other hand, I have computer-generated content. I can interact with that content usually, and I have a kind of integration of the human body. But we still see that there are also other projects that are integrative or transverse. One would be that one here on the right, Metamorphosis VR, where we are involved in the classical Franz Kafka short story of a person turning into a beetle. We hear that story, fictitious story from the back narrated, and we see our own body developing from a human being to a beetle, and we can look at our limbs. We have human legs and arms, but then it turns into the beetle's limbs, and we have antenna and everything. We can see that in a mirror. So we have that gameplay element, that fictitious element, but still it is also about this experience going on. So the questions I want to ask is that matrix helpful for exploring VR documentary? What could be other items that are probably missing from VR documentaries? And finally, if you also know other topics or otherwise remarkable examples that can be analyzed with the help of that matrix. These are my sources. I thank you very much for listening to me.